Welcome, welcome, welcome to Good Thinking. We are live. Welcome, good thinkers from all around the world. We are here for round two for people who love the idea of curiosity and asking better questions and how to think about our questions. This is round two. And we're going to touch on completely new stuff. As the last week, we did round one of asking better questions and specifically asking the most valuable questions, or what we call MVQ. So many of you shared the answer to one of my favorite, most valuable questions, which is, what did your childhood smell like? So for those of you new today, let us know in the chat, or those of you who didn't share again even. What did your childhood smell like? It was just fun to see because it's the greatest way to get to really know the person with the shortest, like the minimal amount of input in terms of a question and the maximum amount of output in terms of the answer. So welcome, good thinkers. Let us know who you are and where you're from. If you're tuning in from LinkedIn, excellent. If you're tuning in from YouTube, awesome. And we're going to be doing a little bit of a different format starting in 2022. Not different format, but we're going to, instead of just us being here together, we're going to be bringing more and more people into our conversation so that we can ask them a lot of questions and interview them and throw a wide range of good thinkers. So I think it's going to be a fun year. So mark your calendars, Monday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, right here on LinkedIn Live. And you can subscribe to YouTube at Becky Saltzman and hit that bell notification, subscribe and hit that bell notification, or hit that bell for notifications. Okay, so you're going to let us know who you are and where you're from. That will be great. I'm going to say hi to some people that are coming on early to the show. Let me take off the banner so we have room for your comments. Okay, I'm new here. Oh, welcome. I'm going to welcome, new good thinker. I hope you become a regular part of the show. Welcome, Sri Lipta. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Michael, good morning from Toronto. Regular good thinker to the show. All right, we have got, yay, and someone else welcomed some LinkedIn Learning, a LinkedIn user welcomed someone new to the show. That's what we do, because we're like about building this community of people who want to steal a little bit of time away from all the time we spend, what to think, so we can luxuriate in thinking about our thinking to improve how we think. So we've got Luxembourg, we have got Atlanta in the house, we have got the UK, we've got April, we've got Allison, also new from Chile, Ohio. Oh, welcome from Ohio. And we've got, let's see, we're going to try to get everyone's comments in from Canada. And we've got the only city in the world with a Zymo. I don't even know what that is. I can't even read this. Everything's scrolling so quickly. So if I do miss your comments, it's not because I was ignoring you. It's because my eyes can't go back and forth so fast between the comments. So welcome from India, and welcome us, and Deep from India. And we've got Ray. My childhood smelled like trees. Someone answered the MVQ. Childhood smelled like trees. So that tells me something about maybe where Ray grew up. And if I wanted to ask a follow-on question, I might say, trees, and then see what Ray did to follow up with that. So we've got Brazil in the house, and we have got India in the house, and we have got Bangladesh in the house. So we've got good thinkers from all over the world, and that's the beauty of the show, because we are able to engage with people who have not only different viewpoints, because we're seeing the world from other places, but different perspectives, because as it turns out, how we interact with our viewpoints are totally different. So it doesn't mean that if we have the same viewpoint, we have the same perspective. All right. So we're Barkley from DC. Roberta says, childhood smelled like fresh air mixed with old diesel cars. Okay, that makes me want to know more about where you grew up. Good morning from Las Vegas and Santa Clara. All right. So keep the comments coming, and we are going to get started because we really need to get into questions today. If you could ask anyone any question, who and what would you ask? That was one of the questions that I asked in the I guess the post. Who and what would you ask? Okay, so as you're thinking about that, you might want to share that. Who and what would you ask? Maybe you would say, I want to ask this person this. It doesn't matter if they're living or dead or never lived or whatever. Who and what would you ask? And then another kind of follow-on question to that is, what is the best question you've ever asked? And if you're not exactly sure what the best question is that you've ever asked, because you're thinking, gosh, have I ever asked a really good question? And sometimes it's hard to evaluate our own questions, although it won't be after today. You might think, what is the best question that you've ever been asked? Or what's the best question that you've ever heard asked? So we've got, my childhood smelled like fried matzah. My childhood smelled like guava. My childhood smelled like crayon and watercolor. Oh, that's interesting. These are all so good. And if we were at a cocktail party or a dinner party or a business networking meeting or whatever, think about how that could be a question that could really fuel the conversation. And this says almost night in India, but hey, they're excited for this live session. I'm excited to have you. We're all excited to have you. Childhood smelled like concrete and the London Tube. Okay, that tells us something. And will you marry me? Will you marry me? Who? Is that the best question? Who did you ask? Did you hear that or did you ask that? Will you marry me? Is that the best question you've ever asked or the best question you've heard? Did someone ask you? Aha. So I was asked, what was the best $100 you spent? Ooh, I like that. Especially on what we call here Cyber Monday. Smells like wet dirt by the rain. Isaac Newton, how to maintain sanity being so different from everybody else. Okay, first of all, I'm going to award right now some rubber chickens to everyone who's participated, because this has been, smells like wet dirt by rain. I love it. Aha. And Michael we lost this. Michael got a great question. Will you marry me? But my question is, did someone ask you that or did you ask someone? My childhood smelled like paper. Paper? Okay, these are the rubber chickens. The rubber chickens, for those of you experienced good thinkers know rubber chickens. We got to get these rubber chickens out to everyone who has definitely participated. Jennifer from DC. And I would ask Elon Musk if he could give me tips on how he has achieved so much. Okay, so how many of you think that if Elon Musk gave you the tips on how he achieved so much, you could follow those tips and have the same outcome? And how many know what that might be? If you look at all the tips that all the successful people gave, what could you be susceptible to? Survivorship bias. Books. What are your values in life? Hey, Heba from Egypt, welcome. All right, so let's get into it. Let's get into the basics of questions. Number one, there's a few things that you've got to kind of get past so we can delve into the nitty gritty. And when you're thinking about questions, you really want to determine the goal for your question. So as we're sharing here, our goals for the question are to connect with other good thinkers. We're definitely, our goal is to connect with other good thinkers, share a little bit about us, maybe get some rubber chickens going, hear about other people. What are your values in life? These are some of the good questions. And we want to share to see if people connect with us. So what are the goals of your questions? Goals are usually one of two things: information seeking or impression management. And you can fit most of the goals for asking questions into one or both of these things. Maybe you want to manage your impression before you seek information. You want to make sure that the person that you ask knows that you're not an idiot for asking something and have a context for asking, but you still want to gain that information. So you could have two goals, but really the goals for questions really boil down to these two things. And then the second thing is to consider the context, because asking the wrong question at the right time or the right question at the wrong time can have an effect on the output, which is the return on your investment, which is the answers that you get. So I'm just going to bring in some of these things into the chat, as many as possible, and we'll see what we can do. All right. The next is to think about when you can swap open-ended questions for closed-ended questions, rather, for open-ended questions. So what's a closed-ended question? What is a closed-ended question? Anyone? How did you meet? That's another good question. What is a closed-ended question? How do you know that you've been asked a closed-ended question? Because you can answer in one of two ways. Maybe you could say, I don't know, but it would be yes, no, or maybe you say, I don't know. A closed-ended question is a question like, will this accomplish our goal? Yes or no. And the key, yes, April says yes or no, just yes or no, yes or no. That's how you know that you can answer. Closed is yes or no. And there's nothing wrong with a closed-ended question. It's really trying to define when you want to ask an open-ended question versus a closed-ended question, and not accidentally asking a closed-ended question when you mean to ask an open-ended question, or giving yourself a limitation that a closed-ended question, it does limit you. So for example, let's say you're trying to figure out, someone presents something to you and you want to know if that's the right answer. So you say, will this accomplish our goal? Is this really what we want to do? And they might say yes, or they might say no. How could you turn, will this accomplish our goal, into an open-ended question? Will this accomplish our goal? Is it closed-ended? How can you turn it into an open-ended question? Anyone? Share in the chat. Share in the chat. How can you turn that into, and there'll be many different ways. I'll give you one way. You could say, how will this accomplish our goal? So you kind of keep in mind the who, what, when, where, and how to move closed-ended questions to open-ended questions. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. So I meant an example which gives a yes or no answer. Of course. Absolutely. All right. So most insights I've ever received this question. If you could not fail, what would you do? I love it. I love it. And then you could even get into, okay, how do you define failure? How do you think we can accomplish our goal? Yes, that is how to turn that simple closed-ended question into an open-ended question. How do we go about reaching our goal? Another one, ask how. Perfect. So let me give you some open-ended question examples, and then we're going to get into a formula that you can use to turn any interaction, whether it's you're at a party or you're in an interview or you're networking or you just meet people, you're moving to a new town and you need to meet people. A formula that you can use so that you are never at a loss for conversation. Okay, we're going to get into that. We'll get a few open-ended question examples. All right. What's your favorite thing since the last time we spoke? What are your thoughts on blank? Who was your favorite? What was your favorite chance encounter? How did you feel about your last great meal out? That can have a lot of impact given the fact that some of us look back on the last meal that we had out as a long time ago. Some people are squeezing in maybe meals out between COVID variants. Who knows? And then you could ask a follow-on question. We're going to get into that, how that relates to the formula in just a second. But what made that so special? So the key is really to ask more questions. And then once you realize the quantity of the questions matter, then you can start upping the quality. And we asked last week, and see what you guys think. See if even if you weighed in last week, is there such a thing as a bad question? Now, a lot of people said, well, bad versus dumb, and it's semantics. But if you think about better questions or not as good a question, how do you know when you've asked not the best question? How do you know? How do you know when you've asked not the best question? We're going to bring in some more comments. How do we know we've accomplished our goal? Absolutely. That's turning in it. What is the idea behind? Oh, I love that. Asking probing questions to generate better answers. Absolutely. How do you know if you've asked a bad question? Put it in the face. All right. So here's the formula. Ready for the formula? The formula is, this is an equation, and it will totally transform how you interact. If you really think about it, it's so easy. Launchpad question. A question that ideally is open-ended enough to launch the conversation. Then you add curiosity fuel. And what do you have to do to be able to do that? You have to be listening. You can't be preparing your next question and not listening to what they've said. You can't have not listened to what they said, so you ask a question that they've already answered. That is a dead giveaway that you are using a formula. You don't want this formula to be transparent. This formula can be transparent if you fuel your launchpad question with curiosity. So launchpad question plus curiosity fuel plus, and this is the part I think a lot of people miss, follow-on question. The follow-on question requires you to listen and add curiosity to the launchpad, to the answer to the launchpad question, so you can ask a follow-on question. All right, so we've got some good ones here. Oh, how do you know? April answers, how do you know you've asked a bad question or a suboptimal question when you get a blank stare? Now, you might have a blank stare because they didn't understand the question, But that goes to understanding the context and understanding the person that you're asking has to have the capacity to answer. They have to have the capacity for all kinds of reasons. They have to feel comfortable. They have to not feel like they're being trapped. They have to feel like their curiosity is as valuable to you as yours is to them. That's an important thing. And on a lot of things where you can ask this question and can ask that question, even out of curiosity, there's a lot of questions that are just like off the table. So you have to make sure that there's that trust, that it's coming from a point of curiosity and that curiosity is valued. So those are some things that it seems so obvious, but it's not. So that's really a good point, a good blank stare. Good question, target knowledge and perspectives. Bad questions, target preferences. Well, what if you, but Abdracha, what if you need to know someone's preferences? Maybe elaborate if you can. All right, let's see. What's the problem behind the idea? What is the next step? Good follow-on questions. And those are good for business, but even in business, we're going to give some ideas of some questions that you can use at work, in interviews, and how to use this formula. So Launchpad plus curiosity fuel plus follow-on question. If anyone wants to put that in the chat, the question formula, Launchpad question plus curiosity fuel plus follow-on question, then we have it. And we've got so many great comments. All right, so we've got these follow-on questions. So what's the best vacation you ever took is the Launchpad question. So you just got back from such and such. What's the best vacation you ever took? Well, why? Or how do you think about vacations relative to other vacations? Like when you go business travel, how do you get a little vacation out of that? What do you do? What are your best tips for enjoying business travel? How was your day? Oh, well, what was the best part? How's your mom? This is a hard one when we have ill relatives, people that are, maybe they have things wrong with them that they're not going to get better from. So, how do you ask? You say, gosh, I'm so awkward. I don't want to ask. I know, my friend's mom has Alzheimer's. I know that every time I ask, it's probably not better than it was. So, maybe what do you ask for a follow-on question? Well, you can say, what are her days looking like lately? What is she enjoying doing? How are you feeling your time with her? Can you help me understand this a bit better? What motivated you to do and say that? And of course, how you ask the question, and we're going to get into envelopes in a minute. How you ask the question can have a profound impact on what you get back. They might feel you're being interrogating. All right. So thank you for those of you who put in Launchpad question plus curiosity fuel plus follow-up. Curiosity about the Launchpad question. Exactly. Launchpad question, curiosity fuel, follow-on questions. Thank you, Rubber Chickens, for helping with that. All right. So what do you need for this formula to work? Well, obviously you need curiosity. You need to know how to be curious, and that doesn't necessarily come as naturally as people think necessarily. But the other thing is you have to listen. And that's where you can get trapped, because if you have a formula that you use and you're not listening, then they can know that, wait a minute, I just answered that. What are you doing? What are you doing here? You're using a trick on me. You're using a tactic on me. People don't like that. So you have to use curiosity and you have to listen. So you have to listen to what they've said in the past. If they've talked about something and then you ask them the same exact question, oops, that formula needs a little finessing. All right. So here are some things you can do. We're going to get into some things you can do, which is stop at the end of your question. So when you're nervous, it's tempting to keep talking. I mean, a lot of these things I'm saying, like, I need to work on this constantly. And I'll tell you the one that I'm really bad at. It's really embarrassing, but I know I'm bad and I know I have to work at it. But stop at the end of your question. Part of it is, and I'm not comfortable with a lot of silence, but it's getting comfortable with silence and being able to use body language, which is harder, if you're on the phone, using body language to draw the answer out. So with the most valuable question, what does your childhood smell like? People said, who said paper? Maybe April said paper. So who said paper? So I said, let's say it was April. I said, April, paper? And then April might give me more of an answer, flesh out the answer. So if you're not comfortable at the end of your question and they give you a blank stare, obviously you need to maybe go backtrack and reformulate. But if they start answering and they give you a short answer, you could then mirror part of that answer and just let a little silence pass, and people will fill in. People will fill in. And I'm going to give you the other one. Yeah, April, wait, it gets worse. This is another one that I'm really bad. And this is like probably a greater sin. A greater sin is, okay, so before we get into that, Ray says, I heard a guideline of waiting a full 10 seconds after posing a question to a group. Yeah, it's interesting if you are standing and presenting. It's amazing the power of silence. It's super uncomfortable for some people, myself, but it is powerful. Silence can be very powerful, and silence in negotiations is crazy powerful. It's amazing if you ask a question where you really want the answer. It's really an answer. Like, would you take less for that iPad? You're selling a used iPad. Would you take less for that iPad? It's amazing what asking something like that does when you add silence to that question, because people will be like, most people say, I'm just wondering, blah, blah. Zip. Would you take less for that iPad? Amazing. Amazing. All right. The second thing, this is my worst, is interrupting the answer to the question you've posed. And what happens is if you bring too much curiosity, which is my problem, sometimes they start answering and you realize, wait, that's not really, I want to know about this and this and this and this and this. And you want to make sure that you get it all in. You don't want to interrupt, but you can't help yourself because sometimes you get so curious that you want to ask more and more and more and more and more before they have a chance to answer the question. And I will tell you straight out, I'm aware that I'm really bad at this. Anyone else? The end result, aside from being annoying, is that they feel rushed or the conversation is taken in a different direction than they were headed. And this is harmful to both of you, particularly if you're trying to control the direction of the conversation. So often, this is something I need to really work on. All of these things. Usually in my case, uncomfortable questions would go confronted by the glamour response of saying, I can't answer that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, April. I can't answer that. I usually don't say I can't answer that because and maybe that's a good thing to say, but I sometimes feel that that's confrontational. So sometimes I might just answer a question I can answer. That way I'm not being confrontational about not answering the question. So, with interrupting, I think, so show some respect, Becky. So I'm working on being comfortable with a moment of silence and letting my curiosity and probably a little bit my ego take a back seat in conversation so I can focus on understanding more than trying to be understood and or understanding that maybe they might want to take the question in a direction that I didn't intend. So those are some things I'm working on. I'm admitting I'm not great. So now the next thing is to think about envelope questions. And this to me is something maybe a little different than people who talk about asking better questions. But these envelope questions include preludes. And one of the most powerful preludes to a question, and particularly where you might not know someone's intent or they might not know yours, or there's a lot, of other cues that could make something contentious, but just the prelude out of curiosity. I cannot tell you the value. You cannot overvalue using the phrase out of curiosity as an envelope, meaning or sandwich, but you put the question in the envelope of out of curiosity and send the question to the recipient. So it's a little different than a sandwich because you can just slip it in there out of curiosity and ask these questions. So these include, things like, and maybe you want to ask a question and you don't want the person to think you're attacking them. So you might say, people are saying blah, 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 that we're not going to make our deadline. How are you thinking about our deadline versus, are we going to make our deadline? So it allows you to create a little envelope for why you're asking the question. So you can blame someone else for the question. You can also preface the question with praise, like, I really value your opinion on this. That's another envelope you can use. And I really like envelopes. I think that they're underutilized, and out of curiosity is probably my favorite. Now, maybe you say someone's going on and on about something and you don't really understand what they're saying. You could say, I'm impressed. I don't pretend to know anything about how quantum computing works. How could you explain it to someone like me? Those kinds of things where you say, well, how does quantum computing work? So you create an envelope where you put your question in the envelope and send it over. Okay, so let's get some comments going. Let's see. I know I've missed a lot of great comments. I'm so sorry, and some of them I'm not even seeing. The other one is that sounds really good. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything though. So someone tells you something and you're like, what are they talking about? But you think, well, maybe what they're saying is, you say that sounds interesting. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Can you walk me through that one more time? Sometimes I'll even, and it's beware of being too self-deprecating, because you could start to be a little bit self-deprecating and people could start taking that seriously. So a little bit of self-deprecation goes a long way. So I might say, I'm a little slow on the uptake today. Could you take me through that one more time? Might not be as good if you've been confused by a lot of things and you want to manage how you're perceived. You might say, that sounds really good. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Can you walk me through that one more time? So beware of too much self-deprecation and beware of none. All right. How about, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying, but I really want to. And that's a little humility, maybe not too much self-deprecation. So don't use too much self-deprecation to envelope your question. So starting out with, this is probably a stupid question, or sorry to bother you. Not a good envelope. You don't need to dumb down your question. There are many ways of communicating the same thing where you are legitimately curious, and you don't need to say this might be a dumb question. You don't need to do that. There's probably never a time that is the best way to envelope your question. All right. So Allison says the envelope can help the answer meet you where you are. Yes, yes, yes. And where you are when they answer. Yes. Sorry. That was my mistake reading. How much detail or at what level information the asker is seeking. Absolutely. Perfect. Okay. The other thing is avoid leading questions whenever possible. Leading questions assume that you already think that you're right and you just want people to say that you're right. And this is a very common thing right now with all of the things that you can't ask and what we're supposed to believe. And it's not just right now, it's been this way, but take a step back and make sure that you scrub assumptions from your question. If you're really seeking to understand, you've got to try to scrub assumptions from your questions. So like, how is this? Do you think we should wait any longer than we already have for an answer? Okay, what's the assumption there? Do you think we should wait longer than we already have for an answer? That's a leading question. Here's another one. Don't you think we should go ahead and ship the product? Or don't you think we should go ahead and make a decision? Or don't you think it's time we turn this project over to someone else? These are leading questions. All right. How can you take a leading question like that and turn it into a curious question? Avoid the leading part and turn it. Let me give you an example. Don't you think we should go ahead and release the product? Could be, how are you thinking about the timing for releasing this product? Where are we? What's our thinking around this? So there's just this little bit of lean, which will not get you the answer that you want, which is as much information as possible. You're going to get the confirmation bias answer, if that makes sense. So, all right. So what's the difference? How many know the difference between, I'm going to have to highlight this. Just a couple of comments that I'm going to highlight in just a minute. Before I do, how many of you know the difference between a negative and positive question? A negative and positive question. All right. First, I'm going to say, yes, April. So am I correct in my understanding? And no, Ashok says, am I correct in my understanding? Yes, that's a clarification. Oh, I really want, and you can envelope that. You could say, I really want to make sure I've got this because this is really interesting. Am I correct in my understanding? And then you rephrase. First principle thinking, scrub assumptions. Yes, Jeffrey. Repeat, please. Hopefully repeat, please. Yeah. I don't know if you're asking me to repeat or whatever. That's a good question. Now I'm like, okay. So positive or negative questions is where people, and this is actually where people who speak English as a first language and English as a second, third, and fourth language can get mixed up. So those of you who are not native English speakers, you'll probably relate to this. Probably similar if you're not a native speaker in the other language, where they're asking positive or negative questions. But I don't know the idiosyncrasies of those languages as much. So if I ask you a negative question like, you don't want to join my book club? It's a lot harder to figure out the right answer than if I ask you a positive question that can easily be answered with a yes or no, like a closed question. So you don't want to join my book club is a negative question. It's somewhat leading. You might not think it's leading, but it can be very confusing to non-native speakers versus, do you want to join my book club? So that's the difference between a positive and negative question. And whenever we're asking negative questions and when you're trying to be culturally sensitive, it can be very confusing to people to understand, wait, what am I supposed to say? Yes. So if I say, don't you want to join my book club? And I say, yes. You don't want to join my book club? Yes. No, how do you answer that? So that's another thing. The next thing is, we're going to go just a few minutes late. Ask exciting questions. Exciting questions are the ones that people will enjoy answering. And this does take curiosity. You have to ask questions that people are excited to answer. And this requires some homework to learn what people want to talk about. So if you are getting into a conversation, a negotiation, a persuasion, an interview, do your research, understand a little bit about the people who are going to be talking to you so that you can ask questions that they're excited to answer. All right. So let's see. Let's ask. As a radio host I used to listen to always ask their guest questions ending in "didn't you" or "wasn't it." It was more about what the host knew versus getting interesting answers from the guest. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those questions that could be a little skill, just like my interrupting, could be a little skill that interviewer needs to work on. We all have stuff to work on. How do you change leading questions to curiosity questions? Okay, well, that's a perfect example. You don't want to join my book club to, do you want to join my book club? Simple as that. Simple as that. Anytime you're asking a leading question, look for the assumption, remove it from the question, and ask the question without the assumption. First principles. Negative. So you don't agree. Perfect example. So you don't agree? Yes. What does yes mean? I don't know. I mean, that's a perfect example. And the negative question could be seen as pushy. Yeah, it can be seen as pushy. And it can also be seen as kind of like, well, it can be seen as rude. But the worst thing is confusing. People can't even give you the answer because they don't know what you're asking. So ask exciting questions. And they're the best type of questions to bring to a party. At the very end, I'm going to give you the most important interview question to ask. So stay to the bitter end and you'll get that. So also ask empowering questions. Empowering questions instill a sense of strength and effectiveness. An empowering question, what are your thoughts? Or how do you think I should think about this? Or what's your advice? These are empowering questions. And so here's my question to you. How do you feel when someone asks if you have any ideas? Do you have any idea? Actually, let me ask you, do you have ideas for who and what topics, who you'd like me to interview and what topics you'd like to see on Good Thinking as we finish out 2021 and move into 2022? Because we're here every Monday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, wherever you are. Yeah, do you have any good ideas? Who do you want me to interview? What topics do you want to cover? I value that tremendously. Okay, so Mitchell, let's see. Mitchell, welcome, Mitchell. Regarding negative phrasing of questions, customer service reps today will ask, do you mind if I put you on hold, rather than saying, may I put you on hold? Phrase a question to garner a yes response. However, that's a really good point. They don't want to know. They don't want a no response. So if they get a no, you can't put me on hold, what are you going to do? Do you mind if I put you on hold? And there's a lot of things with persuasion in asking these questions. That's a really good point, but they may not, maybe they need to put you on hold, so they don't want you to say no. All right. So remember that silence is your friend. Questions create clarity. Most people don't ask enough questions. Use your question formula. But I'm going to end with one just kind of somewhat left of center topic, which is one of the most important questions to be able to make sure that you've covered at the end of an interview is really a point of clarification. Because nowadays interviews, whether they're in person, online, over the phone, whatever, you're filling a lot of boxes with candidates, and you need to make sure that you get enough answers so that you can give the candidates the points in the right categories, you know? And so one of the most important questions to ask at the end of an interview is there anything I can elaborate on to give you a clearer picture? Is there any questions that I could answer better to kind of flush this out for you? Just to make sure that something that you answered wasn't so shallow that they weren't able to understand whether you're, how to categorize you. But just those kinds of things where you make sure that you ask that question and let them think. The second best question is probably, is there anything that if you were me, you would have asked that I haven't asked? Or any incredible question that I've left unasked? Or any answer that I've left flimsy? Those kinds of things where you're flushing out the edges of a conversation because you've got a goal in mind. Those are some of the most important questions. So those are MVQs, right? You've had the moment, the context, the time, and you're ready to launch. So do you have any ideas? Do you have some ideas? Ooh, do you have any ideas versus do you have some ideas? Ooh, I like the distinction there. All right. So thank you. We've gone a little longer. I love all the participation. If you're not joining live and you're joining after the fact, keep the conversation going. You can catch up on all back issues of Good Thinking on YouTube. And like I said, if you have any ideas for who you want to see interviewed and what topics you'd like to cover as we go into 2022, please let me know in the chat, and I'll give you credit for all the great ideas. Thanks so much. Have a great day. And I really, really value all of you good thinkers who are here each week, or even popping in and out to share a little bit of time away from all the time we get told what to think, so we can spend time improving how we think. Thanks.